In 2016, the Oculus CV1 was released, 7 years ago. That's the first consumer Oculus console, released after a bunch of development kits. And after years of patiently waiting, we finally got the consumer version. Sure, it was a little bit clunky. There were external sensors and all that stuff, a screen door effect. The controls messed up sometimes, but it was a working product.
And I, like probably many, if not all of you, had fantasies of Dot Hack, Sword Art Online, or every single isekai anime released in the past 10 or 15 years.
We wanted a VR MMO, in usually a fantasy setting, where we could run around and go on adventures with our friends in a seemingly realistic environment. But since the tech was still a bit experimental, we were okay with waiting a bit. So we waited, and we got games like Beat Saber, which was fun, rock climbing, also okay, bow and arrow games, basically simple small games while we waited for the big stuff to start coming in. Eventually, new headsets were released, and everything was a lot smoother. All the tech was inside the headset. There were no external sensors. Everything just worked better. The screen door effect got smaller and smaller, and in most cases, not noticeable at all. And we even started to get some big AAA games, for example, Half-Life Alyx, which to this day is still held as the main example of a AAA VR game, and arguably the only AAA VR game still, after 7 years of having virtual reality. Even when Sony, one of the largest video game companies on the planet, released their PSVR 2, what was their flagship game? Well, they combined the rock climbing game and the bow and arrow game, so you can get that both in one game, and that was their AAA flagship release game. In fact, as of last month, the top-selling VR games were Beat Saber, which was released in 2018, Creed: Rise to Glory, a movie tie-in boxing game, which was also released in 2018, and Job Simulator, a 2016 game. And here's one of the main problems with VR. The technology is great now, but the games suck. It's basically just a bunch of glorified mobile games, bite-sized games. In fact, many of the examples of AAA experiences, like Resident Evil, you can just play them in 2D mode with your console without VR. So VR is just a tack-on afterthought. Meta invested $10 billion a year into VR. Meta being Facebook, the company that bought Oculus. And that's just one company alone. And what did we get for that? Well, we got VR meeting rooms, floating armless avatars, and Zuckerberg observing Puerto Rican natural disasters in cartoon form. This is what $10 billion gets you in 2023 with VR. The most imaginative stuff that they can think of is a meeting room, which even in the real world, nobody really wants to go to. Nobody wants to get this expensive new VR technology, even though it's impressive, if you're just going to use it for this lame stuff. Even if you ignore the ancillary things, and you focus on playing games, the games are just glorified mobile games. In fact, I would argue current mobile games are far more impressive than what VR is showing us right now. Think about Genshin Impact. That's a console-quality MMO game. It seems like this technology is starting to exist, and the companies don't know what they're supposed to be used for. There was a recent news article about Apple's Vision Pro, their new $3,000 headset, and it's struggling to find developers to come to their events. Not even developers know what they should be making for these things. Nobody knows what these headsets should be used for. Don't you want to buy a $3,000 headset to use the Mac browser? Maybe people want to use it to browse their photos. People don't want VR for this ancillary crap. They want a VR MMO. This is what people fantasized about. This is what people imagined what the future would be like. What were they thinking? Meta is spending $10 billion a year on their Oculus brand. Why don't they spend $50 or $100 million making a VR MMO? Why doesn't Sony do this? This is what everybody wants. Every single fictional piece of VR media is about going into a VR MMO, usually a fantasy setting, and going out, meeting your buddies in a virtual bar, forming a party, going out into a dungeon and raiding and talking and socializing. Nobody wants to just play putt-putt golf. The most successful VR game right now is a free game called VR Chat. You've probably heard of it. And that's one of the main things that people want to have. VR game where you can be whatever you want, in whatever setting you want, and just chilling and chatting with people. There's nothing complicated about it. So people wanted that. Somebody made it for free, and it's not even very good, honestly. It just does the bare minimum, and everybody loves it. So why doesn't someone just make a VR MMO? I did find this one VR MMO called Zenith, but it was made by an indie company, and they obviously don't have enough money to support an MMO, and it's kind of failing from what I see. But why doesn't one of the big players, Sony, Meta, anybody, just try and make an MMO? Is it going to be a big investment? Yeah, $50 or $100 million minimum to make it, plus however much money to support it. But if these guys are dumping billions and billions of dollars into VR, this should be the first thing that they want because they know everybody wants it. All the fantasy media that everybody makes is about VR MMOs. So let's just have a VR MMO. That's what everybody wants, right? Am I wrong or am I crazy? VR is never going to take off if we're just going to keep getting these meeting rooms and stuff. I don't even know what they're thinking with this Facebook, I don't even know what it's called anymore, where you're just floating around and talking to random moms and little kids in the Quest, playing putt-putt golf. I don't even understand, like, who thinks that's fun? Like, when they're sitting there in their meeting rooms thinking about things, like, isn't there one person in that meeting room like, well, I watched Dot Hack in the 90s. That looks super cool. Why don't we make that? Instead, they're like, well, what can we do? And, well, we have the putt-putt golf in the meeting room. Let's put the putt-putt golf in the game. What if we put a little blaster game in there? Like, I do see some PvP games, first-person shooters, that seems to be really cool. So at least we have that going for us, but I want to go into a freaking adventure. I want someone to make Final Fantasy XIV in VR. I want to run around as a Lalafell. Can I just be a Lalafell, please? Anyway, I just want to make that. I saw that, what really prompted me to make this is I saw that Apple Vision Pro article about how they couldn't find developers to make things for it. And it's like, of course you can't. Nobody wants your device to see your ghost eyes through this weird VR headset. I don't even think in their trailer they showed many games or any games at all for the headset. And that's like, who else is going to buy that? Like, what real life application do you have for a VR or even an AR headset? I don't understand how these companies make this much money. They don't have one person in there just going like, well, what about Sword Art Online? That was a cool game. Or Ready Player One, which is just a bunch of 80s references. So that's all I wanted to say. If you agree with me, or if you don't, let me know what you think in the comments. If you like the video, like, subscribe, the usual stuff. Talk to you guys later. Love you.